Welcome, gentle viewers and listeners, to another tranquil journey through the corridors of history. Tonight, we invite you to step quietly behind the grand palace doors, to wander along candlelit hallways, and to discover the tender, hidden stories of royal love. We are grateful you have chosen to spend this time with us, letting the whispers of history guide your mind toward calm reflection and restful sleep. Before we begin, a tender note. If you enjoy this serene exploration of the past, please consider subscribing to our channel. Your support allows us to continue sharing soothing historical tales, meticulously crafted to lull you into peaceful slumber. Tonight's journey begins with a question. Ever wonder what really happened behind those gilded doors, beyond the crowns and ceremonies? Royal love stories, as we will discover, were often stranger, tenderer, and more profound than fiction. From arranged marriages in distant kingdoms to secret letters exchanged in candlelit chambers, from fleeting forbidden affections to enduring companionships that spanned decades. These are the stories that shaped empires, yet remained deeply human. This video is designed to carry you gently through history, a soothing exploration of love, longing, and quiet emotion across centuries and continents. From England to France, from Mughal India to Ming China, each tale reflects the universal heart, fragile, patient, and enduring. As the spoken story ends, the music will continue to play, transitioning into a calming, sleep-inducing atmosphere. This will allow you to drift deeper into relaxation, letting the echoes of royal romance and whispered courtships carry your thoughts into quiet reflection, serenity, and restful sleep. So, make yourself comfortable, perhaps settle beneath a soft blanket, and allow the quiet footsteps of history to guide you. Tonight, we explore the secret and gentle world of royal love, from betrothal to bedtime and beyond into the soft embrace of night. Soft music hums through the still air, a low harp, a whisper of strings, a sound like starlight resting upon stone. Night is settled across the ancient city, and the world outside the palace walls has grown silent. Only the wind lingers, moving gently through gardens where fountains murmur to themselves. Beyond the tall iron gates, the royal palace stands quiet, its towers pale beneath the moon. Once, these halls had echoed with the business of kings, the laughter of nobles, and the distant clatter of armor. Now, in the deep hours of night, all is calm. The torches burn low, the corridors breathe softly, as if the stones themselves have fallen asleep. Inside those grand walls, history lives still, not in the speeches of rulers or the clang of war, but in the quieter moments that rarely found their way into any book. Behind every crown and treaty, behind every curtain drawn against the night, hearts once beat with longing, affection, and uncertainty. The royal halls, for all their splendor, were also the setting for countless private hopes and countless quiet disappointments. It is said that if one could walk these corridors when the world sleeps, one might hear echoes of old conversations carried on the air, gentle laughter, the sigh of silks, the faint rustle of letters sealed in wax. The past lingers here, soft, unhurried, and kind to those who listen closely. In one distant chamber, a golden candle flickers beside a forgotten throne. Its flame trembles, painting warm light upon tapestries that hang heavy with age. Each one tells a story: kings at battle, queens in triumph, processions beneath summer skies. Yet none of them speak of what happened when the ceremonies ended and the doors closed for the night. Beneath those embroidered legends lived the unseen hours, when the crown was set aside and love, uncertain and fragile, dared to exist within the walls of power. A queen once stood by the tall window of this very hall, her gaze lost to the gardens below. She was young then, newly wed to a king she had barely met. The union had been written in ink long before she had learned his name. Behind her, the lady-in-waiting held a folded letter, sealed and unsent. Its words were her own, meant for a friend in another kingdom. Words of doubt, of hope, of wondering whether duty could ever become affection. But the letter was never delivered. The queen only turned from the window, sighed softly and whispered, "Perhaps it will be enough." Elsewhere, in the study beyond the corridor, a young prince sat before a dying fire. The portraits of ancestors watched silently from the walls. In his hand he held a small ivory miniature, the painted likeness of the woman he was to marry. He had seen her only once, across a crowded hall. She had smiled, politely and briefly. Now, staring at her likeness, he wondered whether that smile had been hers alone, or one taught by courtesy and expectation. These moments, delicate as candle smoke, were the unseen fabric of royal life, small thoughts and private fears hidden beneath the weight of crowns and crests. For while history remembers the treaties, the victories, and the heirs, it seldom pauses to remember the quiet hearts that lived within them. The palace, by night, was a world of whispers. The courtiers had long departed to their chambers, their silken shoes leaving no trace on the marble floors. Only the echoes remained faint, rhythmic, as if the walls themselves remembered footsteps of centuries past. Along one corridor, where portraits of kings stretched endlessly into shadow, a pair of unseen figures once walked together after a feast. Their voices drifted softly. "She has not spoken to him since the treaty," said one. "He will speak," said the other. "They always do, in time. Love bends to necessity." Their laughter faded, but their words remained suspended, like dust in candlelight. In the quiet corners of power, love had to learn a careful grace. It was bound by duty, arranged by families, shaped by kingdoms that valued peace more than passion. And yet, somehow, affection found its way through the smallest cracks in protocol. It came in the form of a letter hidden inside a prayer book, or a walk taken too slowly through a shaded garden. It lived in the shared glance across a banquet table, in the lingering touch of hands meant only to greet. The royal halls were filled with such moments, unseen, unhurried, but real. And when the day's ceremonies ended and the torches dimmed, the palaces of old became like great sleeping hearts, filled with dreams of those who once ruled them. Beyond the grand staircases and jeweled chambers, moonlight poured gently through arched windows. It touched the stone floors with pale silver, glimmered upon golden chandeliers, and rested finally upon an empty hall where a crown lay beside a single rose. The crown was cold, gleaming with pride and legacy. The rose had withered, its petals faded, but still beautiful in their fragility. Together they spoke without words of the strange marriage between power and tenderness, how even those who ruled empires could not escape the longing to love and be loved. In every age, behind every throne, this quiet truth endured. From the frostbitten castles of the north to the marble courts of the east, the story repeated itself. Kings who dreamed of peace, queens who yearned for warmth, lovers who met in secret corridors, and others who never met at all. History, though grand in its telling, was built upon such fragile foundations. As the night deepens, the palace grows even quieter. The candles burn low, their light softening into mist. Beyond the windows, the gardens rest beneath a thin silver fog. The fountains whisper on, their songs the same as they were centuries ago. And if one listens, truly listens, one might almost hear the sound of a single heartbeat, the lingering echo of love beneath a crown. This is where the journey begins, not in the blinding splendor of coronations, nor in the sharp clang of destiny, but in the stillness that follows. The royal halls stand waiting, timeless and patient, holding within them the stories of affection and sacrifice that once shaped empires. Tonight, those halls open again, not for ceremony, but for remembrance. Here, among the quiet echoes of silk and candle flame, begins a long, gentle passage through history's most intimate corridors. Here dwell the memories of those who loved within duty's shadow, who found small, human warmth amid gold and stone. The harp fades, the torches dim, and within the stillness, the first chapter of royal love begins. In the halls of grand palaces, where the light of countless candles shimmered against gilded walls, marriage was rarely a matter of the heart alone. Here, crowns and kingdoms intertwined, and love was often a quiet visitor, arriving only in the spaces left open by duty. Royal unions were woven with threads of alliance, politics, and the weight of dynasties stretching across centuries. The grand ceremonies, the flowing gowns, the glittering jewels, all were symbols not merely of affection, but of calculated harmony between realms. In England, for instance, marriages of the crown were pivotal. A union might prevent wars, secure borders, or ensure loyalty among noble families. Queens and princesses were often sent abroad in childhood, pledged to kings they had never met, their destinies decided at tables where maps were spread and treaties signed. The young bride might arrive with a dowry intended to cement peace, bringing wealth, land, or valuable alliances, yet her heart remained a quiet, private domain. Even the most celebrated English marriages, such as those of the Tudors, were entangled in politics. Each knot in the ribbon carried the weight of empire and expectation. Across the Channel, in France, the intricacies were similar, yet shaded with different customs. Royal marriages often intertwined, the fates of kingdoms separated by rivers, mountains, and centuries of rivalry. A French princess might be dispatched to a distant court with a portrait of herself delicately painted. The eyes in the image meant to convey loyalty, beauty, and dignity. The prince she would marry might study the painting carefully, imagining the personality hidden behind it, preparing to navigate a life bound by ceremony and the observances of courtly etiquette. In these unions, love could bloom, but only if carefully nurtured amidst the grandeur and scrutiny of nobles and advisors. Farther east, the Mughal courts of India brought their own blend of splendor and political calculation. Marriages between royal houses ensured loyalty across vast territories and cemented power across distant provinces. A princess's wedding might involve days of celebration, elephants adorned in gold, rivers illuminated by lanterns, and feasts that echoed into the night. Yet behind the spectacle, her position carried weight far greater than personal happiness. A single alliance could shift the balance of power, shaping the history of an empire. Even emperors, whose desires were often hidden behind veils of formality, learned to measure affection alongside responsibility, balancing intimacy with expectation. In Ming China, imperial marriages were equally guided by politics and propriety. A young bride, selected for her family's status, wisdom, or virtue, would enter the forbidden city with instruction and ceremony, each step in her new life framed by obligation. Here, love existed quietly, sometimes in letters exchanged in secret, or in moments of shared observation as the emperor and empress studied court life together. The grandeur of palace rituals could conceal tender gestures, a hand brushed against a silk sleeve, a glance shared across lantern-lit corridors, the soft exchange of a private joke amidst the endless formalities. These subtle intimacies endured, forming the hidden foundation of companionship behind the rigid walls of protocol. In all these realms, the paradox was clear. Marriage was both a tool of empire and a deeply human experience. While treaties, alliances, and dynasties dictated arrangements, hearts, if given space, could quietly bloom. Love might be expressed in small gestures, a bow held slightly longer, a favor granted discreetly, a moment of shared laughter in a quiet corridor. And in those moments, the human essence of royalty, hope, affection, curiosity, and longing emerged, gently reminding them that beneath crowns and silks, they were still people capable of tenderness. Even the ceremonies themselves carried layers of meaning. Dowries, jewels, banners, and vows were not mere adornments. Each was a promise and a statement of intent. A necklace sent ahead of a bride's arrival was both a gift and a token of alliance. A vow spoken before a grand assembly was a pledge not only to a spouse, but to the political stability of a nation. Courtiers observed, nobles whispered, and advisors recorded. All eyes watched, and every gesture mattered. Yet, within the strictures of expectation, small acts of personal attention could plant the seeds of private affection, hidden yet enduring. History shows that across continents, despite the differing ceremonies, cultures, and expectations, one theme was universal: the tension between duty and desire. Royal children were educated in protocol and decorum, yet their hearts were capable of tenderness, curiosity, and longing. Some found companionship quickly. Others navigated years of separation before discovering a quiet bond. And even when passion was constrained, moments of warmth, laughter, and understanding carved a private space in the grandeur of court life. It is easy, in modern imagination, to picture royalty as distant figures, untouchable behind walls of silk and stone. Yet history whispers a gentler truth. The heart often finds a way, even when constrained by circumstance. From England to France, from the Mughal court to Ming China. Young royals navigated complex arrangements, learned the art of patience, and discovered that connection, though subtle, could endure. In the evenings, after councils and formal audiences, many couples would retreat into quieter chambers. Here, far from the gaze of nobility and diplomats, they could share conversation, a smile, or a gesture of reassurance. These moments, Taug simply reinforced the delicate dance between duty and affection. And as night descended over palaces across continents, one could imagine young princes and princesses, empresses and emperors, quietly navigating both political alliances and the gentle stirrings of the heart. Thus, the crowns they wore were more than symbols of authority. They were reminders of responsibility, expectation, and legacy. Yet beneath the jewels and robes, hearts quietly whispered, gestures were carefully offered, and intimacy, slow, deliberate, and patient, found a way to exist. The paradox of royal marriage remained eternal. Grandeur and ceremony, politics and ambition, yet always, somewhere, the fragile pulse of human emotion. And so, as night settles over castles, forts, and palaces, the world of crowns and hearts grows still. The glittering halls, once alive with ceremony, now cradle quiet reflection, and the young royals, bound by duty yet touched by the possibility of affection, rest. They dream not only of alliances and treaties, but also of the subtle intimacies that make their lives truly human, a gentle reminder that even in the weight of empires, hearts endure. The story of royal love seldom began with affection. It began instead with arrangement, with a scroll, a seal, and a promise whispered across borders long before two souls ever met. In the courts of kings and emperors, marriage was not born from the flutter of hearts, but from the measured silence of negotiation. It was a pact written in the language of advantage, a gesture meant to strengthen bloodlines and steady fragile peace. Long before the wedding bells rang, there came the betrothal, that delicate, intricate moment when futures were tied together not by love, but by parchment and prayer. In one kingdom, an envoy rode through snow and wind to deliver a letter sealed in gold. In another, a young princess, scarcely 16, stood before her mother and father as the words of her destiny were read aloud. Her name, her dowry, her future, all spoken into existence before her eyes had ever met the man she was to wed. Such was the rhythm of royal life. Decisions made in candlelight by those who never bore their consequences. The betrothal was not merely a promise, it was a ceremony of diplomacy. Half sacred, half strategic. Courtiers gathered, scribes recorded every phrase, and ambassadors stood witnesses to families, or sometimes to nations, pledged loyalty through the fragile hope of a marriage yet to come. Silken gloves were exchanged, rings presented, and oaths sworn before the cross or the crown. Musicians played soft airs, not of romance, but of reassurance. The people celebrated, believing peace had been secured, though the ones at the heart of it often felt little more than confusion. For the young prince, it meant responsibility, a reminder that his heart no longer belonged to him. For the princess, it meant farewell, not just to her childhood, but to her homeland, her language, her familiar faces. Each betrothal was a quiet migration of dreams. In Somalilands, portraits were painted and sent ahead, each brushstroke a promise of beauty or virtue. Messengers carried these likenesses over mountains and seas, wrapped carefully in velvet. The receiving court would gaze upon the painted face and speak softly. She seems gentle, or he looks noble. Yet the image was often all they had, and the heart behind it remained a mystery. Still, there was ritual and reverence in the exchange. Gifts followed, rings, pearls, and written vows, folded neatly in silk. Some were simple tokens, others laden with symbolism. A lock of hair, a ribbon, a pressed flower meant to represent fidelity. Though these gestures were arranged and formal, they held something human within them, a flicker of hope that, perhaps, love might grow where duty had planted its seed. As the months of waiting passed, the betrothed lived separate lives, joined only by rumor and expectation. In her distant palace, The young princess might learn the customs of her future home, its language, its dances, its manner of address. She would be instructed to smile when she met her future husband, to bow before his elders, and to honor the land that would soon call her queen. At night, she might sit by the window, the moonlight soft upon her gown, and wonder what he was like. Whether he was kind, whether he laughed easily, whether his eyes would meet hers with warmth or indifference. Meanwhile, in his court, the prince would hear tales of her grace and obedience. He might imagine her walking through her father's gardens, or riding by candlelight as he did the same. Their thoughts, though separated by miles, would occasionally brush against one another, not in speech, but in curiosity, a silent wondering that belonged only to youth. The announcement of betrothal was followed by celebration. Bells would ring across cities. Poets would compose verses in their honor. Crowds gathered in the squares to watch fireworks, toasting a future that none of them truly knew. In the castles above, the parents smiled, for treaties had been signed and borders secured. And so, the world rejoiced in what it called love, though it was often something quieter, gentler, and more complicated. There were times, of course, when affection bloomed unexpectedly. Some letters exchanged between betrothed hearts spoke not of politics, but of wonder. "I pray the winds carry your thoughts to me," one might write, "for I find myself already missing someone I have yet to meet." These fragile words, written in ink that has long since faded, remind history that not all arranged unions were devoid of tenderness. Sometimes, in the waiting, the heart began to stir softly, like spring beneath the snow. But not all betrothals met their promised end. Some were broken by shifting alliances, or by the death of a king, or by whispers that one bride was no longer suitable. In those moments, the delicate web of trust unraveled quickly, and the heart, once prepared for duty, was left in silence. A discarded promise could alter the course of nations. A cancelled marriage could turn peace into war. And yet, they betrothed themselves. Those quiet, dutiful souls at the center of history's great chessboard were rarely remembered at all. Still, the art of betrothal continued through the ages. It was a practice born of necessity. It performed with ceremony so grand it almost disguised its cold beginnings. Behind the jeweled curtains and the feasts of celebration, the human truth remained unchanged. Each union began with uncertainty, with hope, with fear. The courtiers might have seen a contract, but for those who waited, it was the beginning of an unspoken prayer, that somewhere within the long corridors of power, they might still find a corner where love could live. When the final preparations were made, the young princess would kneel before the altar of her family's chapel one last time. Candles flickered beside her as she whispered a quiet vow to be brave. Beyond the walls, horses waited to carry her, toward her new life, toward a castle where she would be both stranger and queen. The bells began to toll once more, each note echoing across the fields and valleys. Her attendants followed behind her, their footsteps soft upon the marble floor, and as she crossed the threshold of her childhood home, she looked back only once, her eyes lingering on the world she was leaving behind. In that moment, history posed suspended between the past she knew and the future she did not. The art of betrothal was complete. The promise had been made, sealed not by love's certainty, but by the fragile hope that love might someday find its way. And so she rode on, toward destiny, beneath a pale and silent sky. The day of first meeting dawned with a mist that seemed to hover between time and dream. Through the pale haze, the palace stood waiting, silent, gilded, and expectant. Servants hurried through corridors, preparing flowers, polishing mirrors, and laying carpets so soft that not even the sound of footsteps could disturb the morning calm. Beyond the palace gates, carriages lined the road, their banners fluttering in the cool breeze. The air carried the scent of lavender and rain-soaked stone, and the faint chiming of distant bells marked the hour that would bring two royal strangers together for the first time. For months, their names had been spoken together, whispered in treaties, toasted at feasts, prayed over in chapels. Yet until this moment, they had never truly seen one another. Now, history held its breath. Inside the grand receiving hall, courtiers gathered like a living tapestry of silks and jewels. Gentlemen in brocade stood beside ladies veiled in lace, their conversations hushed but charged with anticipation. At the far end of the chamber, sunlight filtered through colored glass, casting soft hues of ruby and gold across the marble floor. The prince waited beneath the high-arched doorway. His attire was ceremonial, velvet and silver, heavy with embroidery, yet his hands betrayed a quiet nervousness as he adjusted the edge of his cloak. Though raised to command armies and councils, he had never been taught how to greet the woman to whom his future now belonged. Outside, the carriages arrived. Hooves struck the cobblestones in a rhythm both graceful and solemn. When the door opened, the young princess emerged, her gown trailing like light itself. She paused for only a heartbeat before ascending the palace steps, her face calm, her breath measured. No one spoke. The moment itself was ceremony enough. When she entered, the air seemed to shift, as if the very walls had drawn closer to witness. The courtiers bowed. The choir began a low, suiting him, and the two were brought together at last. He stepped forward, offering a hand gloved in white. She lowered her gaze, as custom demanded, and placed her fingers lightly in his. Their touch lasted only a second, a mere brush of skin and silk. Yet it carried all the weight of generations and kingdoms. They exchanged the practiced words of courtesy, voices soft but steady. Their dialogue tout simple was layered with meaning. He spoke of honor and welcome. She replied with gratitude and grace. Around them, courtiers listened with smiles that did not quite reach their eyes, noting every syllable, every pause, every sign of harmony or hesitation. But somewhere beneath the etiquette, something faint began to stir an awareness that neither had expected. For the first time, these two lives, once only names on parchment, stood side by side, real and breathing. The rest of the day unfolded like a painting in motion. There were processions through the garden, where fountains whispered beside marble statues. There was music played on lutes and viols, the melodies slow and wistful. And there were glances, fleeting, uncertain, yet carrying a spark of curiosity. He noticed the way her laughter, rare but genuine, softened the air around her. She saw in him not the distant figure of alliance, but a man who, for all his titles, seemed quietly unsure of himself. Between teams, silence became a language of its own. When words faltered under the weight of protocol, their eyes completed what etiquette could not. As the feast began that evening, torches flickered along the great hall. The scent of roasted fruits and honeyed wine filled the air. Minstrels sang of ancient lovers, not to stir passion, but to remind the world that love, even among crowns, was a story still worth telling. They dined side by side, separated by formality yet joined by circumstance. At times their gazes met across the gilded table, and though neither spoke of it, something subtle began to change. A soft uncoiling of tension, a shared moment of quiet understanding. After the feast, as the court retired to music and dance, the prince invited her to walk upon the terrace overlooking the palace gardens. It was a rare gesture, bold within the boundaries of decorum, but one met with approving smiles from those who hoped affection might bloom. The night air was cool and fragrant, with the scent of roses and wet stone. Below, the fountains shimmered in moonlight. Above, the stars gathered like scattered jewels across the sky. For a time, they walked in silence. The only sounds were the soft rustle of fabric and the whisper of the breeze through the ivy. Then, at last, he spoke, not as a ruler, but as a man. He asked whether she found the journey tiring, whether she missed her homeland. Her answers were gentle, measured, yet not without warmth. She spoke of rivers and fields, of the scent of the sea from her window at dawn. And when she smiled, truly smiled something in his heart, long schooled to obedience, felt unsteady. They spoke of small things, of the gardens, of books, of music. The conversation was modest, yet it flowed with surprising ease. There was no need for grand declarations. In that quiet exchange, they discovered what neither treaty nor ceremony could grant: a glimpse of shared humanity. For the first time since their names were bound, they were not prince and princess, but two young souls, standing at the edge of a vast and uncertain bond. As the night deepened, a bell rang softly from the distant chapel tower, a signal that the day of ceremonies had ended. The court would soon withdraw, the music fading, the torches dimming one by one. He offered to escort her back through the long corridors lined with tapestries and flickering candles. Their footsteps echoed in gentle rhythm across the polished stone. At the door of her chamber, they paused. He bowed. She curtsied, gestures of ritual, yet filled now with something unspoken. "Good night," he said softly. Her voice, like the hush of falling snow, answered, "And may peace rest upon your dreams." Then the door closed, leaving only the faint scent of lavender in the air. He lingered for a moment longer, as if listening to the silence, then turned and walked away through the sleeping palace. The moonlight followed him along the corridor, pale and silver, like a watchful witness to the birth of something delicate and uncertain. Later that night, when both lay awake in their separate chambers, neither could quite forget the other's eyes. The prince thought of her quiet composure, the calm way she spoke, the grace that needed no instruction. The princess remembered the kindness in his tone, the hesitance that revealed his youth more than his crown. Each wondered, not with passion, but with quiet hope, what the days ahead would bring. Beyond the palace walls, the world slept beneath a blanket of stars. The torches burned low, the fountains whispered, and the ancient stones seemed to hum with memory. Another royal marriage had begun, not yet with love, but with possibility. And as dawn approached once more, the first light touched the eastern sky, soft as the promise of something still unfolding. In the quiet chambers of distant palaces where candlelight trembled softly against walls of tapestry and stone, a different kind of intimacy thrived. The intimacy of words sent across miles, folded into parchment, sealed with wax, and entrusted to messengers who traveled under moonlight. For royal lovers, separated by alliances, borders, or the duties of empire, letters became the vessels of their hearts, the whispered confidences that could not be spoken aloud amidst the eyes of courtiers, advisors, or family. In this delicate world of ink and paper, emotions were both hidden and revealed, carefully encoded, and yet entirely human. Young princesses in foreign courts often waited for weeks, sometimes months, to receive word from their promised consorts. A letter would arrive, carried by a rider through winding roads, across forests and rivers, sometimes under the cover of night to avoid the gaze of rivals or curious servants. The envelope, sealed with family crests or intricate wax impressions, held a world of anticipation within it. A carefully chosen greeting, a compliment veiled in formality, a question that hinted at curiosity or longing. In these small gestures, entire worlds of emotion were conveyed, a fleeting smile in ink, a gentle sigh pressed onto parchment. Even when marriages were arranged in early childhood, letters allowed hearts to meet long before bodies did. A young prince might receive the first portrait of his bride, and alongside it, a carefully composed poem or note. Lines of verse spoke of virtue, loyalty, and admiration, and sometimes contained hidden hints of humor or playful teasing. The princess, upon reading such words in the still of her private chamber, might feel a flutter of curiosity, a whisper of connection that transcended distance, ceremony, and expectation. History provides glimpses of such tender exchanges. Consider Henry VIII, before the turbulence of his later reign. In his early letters to Anne Boleyn, one finds a careful balance of admiration, earnest inquiry, and subtle charm, though each word was weighed for propriety and political implications. The letters offered a bridge between two lives, an opening for the private to flourish amidst public scrutiny. Catherine of Aragon, too, wrote with quiet dignity, conveying devotion, intelligence, and patience in her correspondence, her words echoing across the years as evidence that even amidst duty, affection could emerge through careful, deliberate writing. In France, royal courtship often depended upon similar subtleties. Princesses sent poems delicately folded in tiny envelopes, sometimes adorned with pressed flowers or colored inks, each symbol chosen for meaning. A blue ink might signify loyalty, a sprig of lavender, fidelity or quiet longing. Princes and nobles responded in kind, their handwriting deliberate, carefully measured, reflecting both decorum and the stirrings of genuine interest. Letters became more than communication. They were ritual, ceremony, and private theater all at once. A quiet space where hearts could meet away from the rigid gaze of the court. Across continents, The Mughal courts relied heavily upon written correspondence to cultivate early romance. A young bride, placed far from her family's lands, might receive letters adorned with miniature paintings or elaborate calligraphy, each brushstroke offering a glimpse into the care of her future spouse. The emperor, in turn, might compose verses praising her intellect, her beauty, or her virtue, gestures that spoke louder than any public declaration. The exchange of letters became a dance of language, imagery, and emotion, a private stage for connection where words alone could build a bridge of intimacy. Even the simplest lines carried weight. A question about the weather could conceal curiosity about daily routines. A polite compliment might hint at admiration or desire. Messages were often encoded in subtle ways. Initials hidden within acrostics, lines arranged to suggest meaning to the discerning eye, symbols chosen to convey private understanding. These coded messages allowed hearts to speak with discretion, balancing duty, propriety, and the very human need for connection. The process of letter writing itself became ritualistic. Royal hands, gloved or bare, would press quill to parchment under the soft glow of candlelight. Ink-stained fingers traced careful curves. Pauses were deliberate, and each fold and seal was treated with reverence. The act of composing a letter demanded thoughtfulness, and in its composition, the writer could explore feelings otherwise constrained by a court etiquette. It was a meditation in patience, an exercise in both restraint and expression, where love and longing were whispered in ink rather than spoken aloud. Receiving such letters was equally transformative. A princess might retreat to her private balcony or garden chamber to read, savoring each word, letting the tone of the writer wash over her in the quiet of her soul. The parchment, warm from being held, or bearing faint traces of the sender's hand, became a talisman of connection, a proof of attention and affection that transcended miles in protocol. And when a reply was composed, care was taken to ensure that words reflected sincerity, respect, and when possible, the budding stirrings of personal attachment. The repetition of letters, the ongoing correspondence established rhythm. Days passed, letters arrived, responses were sent, and in this exchange, time was marked by the beating of the heart rather than the ticking of clocks. The act itself became soothing. Each letter, a small thread weaving lives together. Each response a gentle reassurance that even in separation, connection endured. It was a slow, deliberate cultivation of intimacy, carried out in ink, paper, and quiet reflection. Even subtle historical anecdotes highlight this gentle intimacy. A French princess might describe the sunlight on a courtyard wall or a favorite blossom, signaling a desire to share her daily world. A Mughal prince might include a verse describing the flight of a falcon or the shimmer of moonlight on a garden pond, inviting his bride to observe beauty as he did. Such gestures, small in appearance, were monumental in their effect. They nurtured curiosity, affection, and trust, slowly bridging the gap between political arrangement and personal connection. These whispered courtships, conducted in letters and poems, offered a secret world. In that world, the grand palaces became quieter, the formalities of court softened, and the fragile pulse of human emotion found room to grow. The letters were more than messages. They were private confidences, invitations to intimacy, and meditations in longing. In their silence, they carried the weight of expectation, yet also the tender promise of hearts quietly meeting beyond the eyes of history. And so, in the evenings, after the bustle of palace life had subsided, and the halls were quiet, young royals would often retreat to their chambers, letters in hand. By candlelight, they read and reread, tracing the curves of each line, savoring every carefully chosen word. The act itself became soothing, a meditation that prepared them for rest. Through these whispers on parchment, hearts communicated, yearnings and love patient, quiet, and enduring, grew even when the world demanded restraint. Thus, in the tapestry of royal life, letters and poems were the threads that bound distance, duty, and affection together. They reminded princes and princesses, kings and empresses, that even amidst ceremony, obligation, and scrutiny, the heart could still find its voice. And as candlelight flickered across polished floors, and the quiet of night settled over stone towers and gilded halls, the whispers of royal love carried softly into sleep, promising that even in separation, connection endured, a gentle echo of intimacy across time and space. The palace was never truly silent. Even in the stillest hour of night, footsteps whispered along marble floors, the faint murmur of servants carried through corridors, and candles flickered like living thoughts upon the walls. It was a world of order and observation where no gesture went unseen, and every smile was a kind of performance. Within this gilded maze, the young prince and princess now lived out the next act of their story. Their betrothal, once a quiet arrangement whispered between kingdoms, had been made public. Letters could no longer cross the distance between them in secret. Every word they spoke was now heard by dozens of ears. And yet, beneath the formalities of court life, something fragile still endured the memory of those letters. The quiet understanding written in ink and silence. With the announcement of their engagement, the palace stirred like a theater before a grand performance. Tapestries were washed and rehung. Musicians rehearsed in long vaulted chambers, and cooks experimented with new delicacies meant to impress visiting dignitaries. The queen's ladies fluttered about with veils and jewels, while heralds prepared long scrolls of titles to be read aloud. Every corner of the court seemed to hum with ceremony, but behind the splendor lay a quieter tension, the watchful eyes of nobles, the whisper of rivals, the careful maneuvering of alliances. For love, in such a place, was not only a sentiment, it was a statement. To appear affectionate was expected. To appear too affectionate could be dangerous. At formal dinners, they sat beside one another, their movements studied by an entire hall. When he spoke, she smiled with grace. When she laughed, he lowered his gaze modestly. Yet exchange every glance, every word was weighed and interpreted as a sign of favor or intent. The courtiers leaned close to one another, whispering meanings into moments that perhaps meant nothing at all. The prince, though trained in diplomacy, sometimes longed for simplicity, a world beyond protocol. He would look across the table and recall the ease of their letters, the way her words had once flowed freely upon the page. Now, even the smallest conversation was guarded by formality, and yet, amid the noise of the hall, there were still fragments of honesty. Once, as the music began and they rose to dance before the court, he offered his hand the gesture required, expected. But when their palms met, there was a subtle pressure, a brief exchange of warmth that belonged to no ceremony at all. For a heartbeat, the palace ceased to exist, only the sound of soft steps on polished floors, only two figures moving beneath chandeliers of flame. But outside the glow of the ballroom, shadows gathered. Among the courtiers were those who watched with envy, and those who served other ambitions. Rumors began to flow like ink spilled across parchment. Rumors of secret tenderness, of hidden promises, of alliances that might tilt power one way or another. One lady of the court, known for her charm and her sharp tongue, whispered to another that the princess's heart was too easily moved. Another noble suggested that the prince's devotion was a facade, a performance crafted to please the people. No one spoke such things aloud, but in the palace, silence was rarely empty. It was a vessel filled with speculation. Despite the quiet intrigue, preparations for their union continued. Artists painted portraits, sculptors carved likenesses, and scholars composed verses to honor the soon-to-be married royals. Every morning brought a new ritual, a meeting with advisors, a procession, a prayer. The pair met often, but always in the company of many, surrounded by attendants who turned privacy into a luxury. Still, they found ways to speak through small gestures. A shared look during a council session, a brief pause in conversation as if both waited for an unspoken memory to resurface. Sometimes, when they walked through the palace gardens, they would slow their pace just enough to fall a few steps behind the retinue. There, beneath flowering arches, or by the quiet fountains, they might exchange a few simple words. "How have you been? Did you sleep well? Do you still walk the gardens at dawn?" The questions were plain, but the tone carried the weight of care. In a place where words could not be free, tenderness lived in tone and pause. There were also nights of festivity, grand feasts that lasted until dawn, where ambassadors toasted, poets recited, and musicians played until their fingers trembled. At such gatherings, the prince and princess were the centerpiece of admiration. Seated upon a raised dais, smiling through endless introductions, they accepted blessings from nobles who once doubted them, compliments from foreign guests, and polite envy disguised as praise. And through it all, they performed their parts, perfectly calm, dignified, gracious. Only in fleeting moments did truth slip through the slight curve of a smile, the softening of eyes that met by accident. To the court, these were gestures of royal courtesy. To them, they were remnants of a shared dream that had survived the machinery of politics. But the palace, for all its beauty, had a cruel way of consuming intimacy. Each day brought new demands, new expectations, new performances. Even letters, once the lifeline of their affection, were now written by scribes on their behalf. Formal correspondences meant for public display. The prince often wondered if their private selves would vanish into the ceremony, if the quiet friendship they had built in secrecy could survive the scrutiny of crowns. And yet, each time he saw her, he recognized the same thought in her eyes. There was a steady calm between them, a wordless vow. We will remain ourselves, even beneath the gold and the gaze. Outside, the city celebrated their union to come. From the palace balconies, one could see streets hung with garlands, markets filled with music and laughter. The people believed in the fairy tale, and perhaps that belief made it real, if only for a moment. In the evenings, after the feasts and ceremonies, the princess would sit by her window and watch the torches burn along the walls. The prince, too, would walk to his balcony, the night wind cool upon his face, and somewhere between them, across courtyards and corridors, a quiet peace existed, shared but unseen. The palace remained a stage, and they its leading players. But beneath the crowns, there were still two souls who had found one another by chance, and by courage, in a world that seldom allowed either. As the chapter of their betrothal neared its close, the final preparations for their marriage began. Priests rehearsed the vows, seamstresses worked by candlelight, and the scent of incense drifted through the halls. Their union, soon to be sealed before all, would mark not just the joining of kingdoms, but the test of whether love could endure in the glare of power. And so, as night settled over the palace, the sound of laughter faded, replaced by the hush of sleeping walls. In that hush, one might imagine the faint echo of music still lingering, the rhythm of a dance that had begun not in splendor, but in letters, in longing, and in hope. Within the grand corridors of palaces and the hidden alcoves of castle gardens, love sometimes appeared where it was least expected, forbidden, whispered, and concealed behind heavy curtains of protocol and duty. Royal hearts, bound by crowns and alliances, occasionally strayed from the rigid paths laid before them, discovering in secrecy the quiet thrill of affection denied by circumstance. These hidden stories were not loud or scandalous in the way the world might imagine. They were subtle, delicate, and deeply human, echoing the universal longing for companionship and understanding. In the courts of France, for example, a young noblewoman might capture the attention of a prince far removed from her immediate responsibilities. Their meetings were brief and veiled in shadows, often limited to walks through secret gardens, glances exchanged across private galleries, or softly spoken words in the privacy of a study. Every gesture was measured, a handbrush slightly too long, a smile lingering in the candlelight, a whispered comment meant only for the intended ears. The thrill of secrecy transformed the ordinary into something luminous. A stolen moment felt richer because the world could not witness it. The Ottoman courts, too, held their own stories of hidden affections. Harem walls, often imagined as rigid and impenetrable, contained within them intricate social dynamics, confidants, and quiet passions. A sultan might favor a gentle companion, exchanging thoughtful words, tender glances, or private conversations through carefully chosen intermediaries. Letters or poetic notes could travel between lovers, encrypted in metaphor and imagery, where every flower, color, or line suggested devotion and longing. Even in a world governed by strict hierarchy and expectation, the human heart sought ways to reach out, to express what could not otherwise be spoken. Forbidden love, while constrained by circumstance, also existed in England's royal history. A nobleman might find himself drawn to a queen or princess, yet the rules of court and dynastic duty barred public acknowledgement. Private walks through palace gardens, fleeting touches of the hand during ceremonies, and careful exchanges of letters created a realm where emotions could safely be explored. These acts were not reckless. They were measured, cautious, yet full of warmth and vulnerability. It was in these carefully navigated moments that royal love became deeply human, fragile, hopeful, and intensely private. Even the Mughal courts of India carried whispers of affection that could not see the light of public day. Emperors, bound by the needs of empire, occasionally sought solace in the quiet companionship of a trusted confidant or gentle favorite, a shared smile at a garden fountain, a soft note sent through an intermediary, or a glance across a hall of courtiers became profound expressions of tenderness. In secrecy, emotions could be nurtured without the weight of expectation, creating bonds that were no less real for being hidden. The nature of forbidden love demanded ingenuity. Secret meetings were planned with care. A chamber overlooked by few, a balcony shielded by vines, or a quiet passage where steps echoed softly against stone. Every word, every movement, carried significance. A softly spoken compliment, a hand lightly resting on a sleeve, a shared laugh at a minor mishap. These were treasures of intimacy, heightened precisely because they were not meant for the public eye. Poetry and letters were also vital tools for secret affection. Couples encoded their feelings in metaphor, images, and careful phrasing, ensuring that only the intended recipient could grasp the true meaning. A description of a moonlit garden might secretly signify longing. A verse about a bird's flight might speak of freedom in an enclosed court. These coded messages allowed hearts to meet across distance, time, or expectation, providing solace in the quiet moments of the day. Even small touches of human vulnerability played a role in forbidden affections. A prince, speaking too softly in a corridor, might reveal a hint of longing in his tone. A princess, responding with a fleeting glance or a delicate nod, could communicate warmth without breaching decorum. It was a language built entirely of subtlety, requiring attentiveness, patience, and discretion. A form of intimacy that could flourish only in the shadows. These secret relationships, while hidden, were no less significant than public unions. They reminded the royals of their humanity, allowing moments of playfulness, tenderness, and emotional honesty. The heart, even when bound by duty, found a way to express itself through glances, gestures, letters, or stolen moments. In the quietude of corridors, gardens, or private chambers, affection persisted, proving that love could exist even where society forbade its acknowledgement. The emotional rhythm of forbidden love was often slower, deliberate, and cautious. Every interaction carried weight. Every word was measured. Yet within this careful dance, joy and comfort could be found: a shared smile, a soft laugh, a fleeting touch. The very constraints imposed by circumstance heightened the awareness of connection, making each encounter, however brief, resonate with quiet intensity. Even centuries later, these stories endure as soft echoes of human longing. They are not tales of scandalous intrigue, as many might imagine, but of patience, discretion, and the quiet courage it takes to love within limits. From Europe to Asia, from sprawling palaces to intimate chambers, forbidden affections remind us that love does not require permission. It merely requires space, however hidden, however fleeting, to breathe and exist. As the sun set and the palace quieted, these secret romances found their own moments of serenity. The courtiers retired, candles flickered low, and the heavy doors closed against prying eyes. In that stillness, hearts could whisper freely, hands could touch without expectation, and love, tender, fragile, and enduring, could flourish quietly behind the curtains of obligation. Thus, the hidden world of forbidden affections and secret affairs forms a delicate layer within the vast history of royal love. It was a world where emotion thrived in silence, gestures spoke volumes, and intimacy, though concealed, was profoundly real. Even when constrained by duty, protocol, or circumstance, the human heart reached for connection, proving that love, patient and careful, always finds its way, quietly shaping the private histories of kingdoms. And so, as night settles over the palace, With corridors hushed and candlelight soft against stone walls, the echoes of these secret romances remain. They linger like whispered verses, fleeting touches, and soft smiles, a reminder that even in worlds of duty, crowns, and expectation, the heart finds its own sanctuary. In these quiet corners, love survives, quietly, gently, enduring across time. Across kingdoms, the day of a royal wedding was unlike any other. From the earliest light of dawn, palaces stirred with quiet anticipation. Servants moved with gentle precision, arranging tapestries, polishing silver, and preparing chambers for the ceremonies that would not only unite two lives, but also symbolize the union of dynasties. The air was fragrant with flowers and incense, each scent chosen to honor tradition, evoke reverence, and subtly signify virtues such as fidelity, loyalty, and courage. Guests arrived with measured grace, nobles from distant lands and neighboring realms, their attire glimmering with silk, velvet, and precious stones. Colors were carefully chosen, the deep blues of loyalty, the soft golds of prosperity, and the pale pinks that whispered of innocence and affection. Even in the midst of this splendor, every movement was deliberate, every gesture a reflection of centuries-old customs. Courtiers and attendants observed protocols so intricate that the slightest misstep could ripple across the tapestry of ceremony. In England, royal weddings often unfolded with stately pageantry. Knights' banners waving gently in the breeze accompanied princesses as they crossed palace courtyards. Music floated softly from minstrels and orchestras, the notes blending with the murmur of whispered greetings. Processions were long and carefully choreographed, yet within the precise steps there was a subtle poetry, the sway of a gown, the soft tap of heels on polished floors, the glimmer of anticipation in a young bride's eyes. Across the Channel in France, weddings combined grandeur with intimacy. Palace halls adorned with tapestries depicting myth and history became stages for vows that echoed across time. The bride and groom exchanged gifts not only of wealth but of symbolism. Jeweled rings, delicate veils, and scrolls that bore the signatures of families and witnesses. The ceremony itself was a performance, yet even amid the spectacle, private moments glimmered, a hand lightly resting on an arm, a glance shared in a quiet corner, or a subtle nod of acknowledgement between newly united hearts. Far to the east, in the Mughal courts of India, the scale of celebration was breathtaking. Elephants draped in silk and gold carried brides through gardens ablaze with lanterns and blooms. Fountains reflected the rising sun, creating dancing mosaics of light on marble floors. Music and poetry accompanied every step, while ministers and courtiers observed with reverence, their whispers mingling with the melodies of flutes and sitar. Yet even in this magnificence, moments of quiet tenderness emerged, a bride and groom sharing a brief smile behind the folds of their ceremonial robes, a gentle touch during the procession, a private laugh amidst the elaborate ritual. In Ming China, imperial weddings followed protocols so intricate that each gesture bore weight beyond the personal. Brides and grooms moved according to symbolic steps, often learned from a young age, their motions reflecting order, virtue, and harmony. Even the smallest detail, the angle of a bow, the position of a fan, or the careful placement of a silk sash conveyed meaning. Despite these rigid structures, intimacy found a way. A subtle glance across the ceremonial hall, a gentle alignment of hands during the exchange of gifts, or the quiet acknowledgement of shared understanding. The grandeur of these weddings was not merely spectacle. Every color, every note of music, every bow, and every ring symbolized the weight of dynasties, the hopes of nations, and the bonds of family. Yet within the ceremonial splendor, the human heart was present, quietly observing, cautiously exploring, and tentatively celebrating connection. These ceremonies were both public statement and private opportunity, where duty intertwined with the possibility of genuine affection. After vows were exchanged, and the applause and fanfare subsided, a gentle calm descended. Candles flickered along hallways, softening the hard edges of marble floors and gilded doors. Guests retired to their chambers, leaving the newly united couple in the hush of palace corridors, where the quiet seemed almost sacred. It was in these first private hours that the emotional weight of the day settled, and hearts could shift from ceremony to intimacy. The symbolism of rings, veils, and ceremonial gifts carried resonance beyond the spectacle. A ring, for instance, was more than a jewel. It was a promise, a bond witnessed by both families and history itself. Veils concealed yet revealed, framing the bride in mystery and beauty while symbolizing purity and transition. Gifts exchanged were reminders of loyalty, mutual respect, and shared destiny, each item imbued with meaning that only time and reflection could fully reveal. In quiet corridors, the couple could finally observe one another beyond the gaze of the court. Hands brushed lightly against fabric, eyes met briefly in private recognition, and soft smiles acknowledged the beginning of companionship. Here, away from the spectacle, love could emerge in small gestures, patience, and gentle attention. The kind of love that endures not in public acclaim but in steady presence, shared understanding, and quiet loyalty. Even the smallest routines after the celebration were imbued with warmth. A shared breakfast in a sunlit chamber, a soft exchange of words in a hidden gallery, or the simple act of walking together in a private garden became moments of intimacy grounded not in grandeur but in mutual recognition and attentiveness. These rituals, seemingly ordinary, carried the enduring power of connection, gently weaving hearts together amid the responsibilities of empire. Across continents and centuries, the pattern was similar. Weddings were ceremonies of splendor, alliances, and symbolism. Yet within that structure, the human heart persisted, finding subtle ways to express curiosity, affection, and connection. The grandeur did not diminish intimacy. Instead, it framed it, offering moments of reflection and private understanding amidst the public spectacle. As night fell and palace halls emptied, the echoes of music, footsteps, and whispered greetings softened into gentle silence. The couple, now united not only by ceremony but by shared understanding, could rest. The flickering candlelight on tapestries and marble floors cast elongated shadows, creating quiet corners where hearts could breathe, where intimacy could unfold, and where the first night together marked the beginning of enduring companionship. In the hush of the palace, the grandeur of the day became a backdrop to a more subtle reality. Love, even in the midst of empire, flourished in small gestures, private smiles, and shared moments. The story of each wedding, across England, France, Mughal India, and Ming China, was more than spectacle. It was the quiet emergence of connection, the soft acknowledgement of hearts meeting, and the beginning of a journey that would echo in the private chambers of history long after the public applause had faded. And so, as candles dimmed and corridors lay in gentle shadow, the halls of the palace held a calm peace. Weddings of empire, magnificent and symbolic, had ended, leaving behind a delicate balance, the splendor of tradition and the quiet promise of personal intimacy. In this gentle convergence, the royal couple could rest, hearts lightened by ceremony, yet quietly aware of the tender beginnings of a shared life. beyond the glittering ceremonies, the grand processions, and the fleeting romances that whispered through palace corridors. Another, subtler form of royal love endured, the love of companionship, matured through years, tested by duty, and softened by a shared experience. This was the quiet affection between queens and consorts, where intimacy grew not from novelty, but from endurance, trust, and the patient rhythm of everyday life within the walls of palaces, castles, and stately homes. It was a love both ordinary and extraordinary, framed by the responsibilities of empire yet nourished by simple acts of care. Consider the partnership of Queen Victoria and Prince Albert of England, a union that spanned decades and shaped the very culture of the British monarchy. Their love, forged amid duty and expectation, was one of deep, mutual respect. Albert, a consort whose position carried little formal power, became Victoria's confidant, advisor, and partner. Together, they navigated political crises, family obligations, and the vast machinery of empire. Yet their bond was maintained through quiet gestures, a hand offered for comfort during grief evenings, spent walking through palace gardens, and letters exchanged, even when separated by duty. The essence of such companionship lay not in grand displays, but in enduring presence. A queen, ruling with the weight of law and tradition, could rely upon a consort whose loyalty was unwavering, whose counsel was gentle, and whose affection, though private, was steadfast. In shared meals, walks in private corridors, and hours spent in mutual observation of court life, intimacy grew slowly, carefully, and deeply. The beauty of these connections was subtle. A glance, a shared smile, or the quiet knowledge that another human heart was aligned with one's own. In medieval Europe, long-term partnerships often balanced political necessity with personal connection. Queens and consorts managed vast households, oversaw education of heirs, and coordinated the subtle rituals of diplomacy. Yet amid these responsibilities, companionship offered solace. It was a form of love built not on passion alone, but on loyalty, patience, and mutual understanding. Through wars, absences, and the relentless march of ceremonial duties, such relationships endured because they were founded on steady commitment rather than fleeting desire. In France, similar bonds could be observed. Consider a queen who, after years of observing courtly intrigue, learned to trust her consort not only with her secrets, but with her emotions. The consort, in turn, might navigate the complexities of palace politics, ensuring the queen's authority and safety while quietly cultivating private companionship. Long walks in gardens, moments of shared observation during ceremonies, or the simple act of enjoying music together in an empty chamber became the rhythm of their connection. Over time, love was expressed not through grand declarations, but through the reliability of attention, understanding, and subtle care. In Asia, these patterns echoed in both the Mughal and Ming courts. Consorts and empresses, bound by ritual and expectation, often forged deep relationships over decades. A Mughal emperor might depend on his consort for counsel and companionship, finding in private moments a respite from the pressures of empire, shared poetry, quiet conversation, and attention to personal habits. A favorite flower, a preferred seat in a garden pavilion, or the gentle encouragement of a hobby became expressions of enduring affection. Even amid the rigid structure of the court, these bonds persisted, testament to the resilience of human connection. The beauty of companionship in royal life lies in its quiet endurance. Love matures when shared across years, tested by absence, grief, and responsibility. It is the comfort of a familiar voice, the warmth of a hand resting on a sleeve, and the gentle laughter that punctuates long conversations in private quarters. Through these small, consistent histories, affection transforms from fleeting passion into a steady, nourishing presence, a love that does not demand spectacle, but exists fully in shared experience. Even when public duties drew them apart, long-term partners found ways to sustain connection. Letters became instruments of care, notes written with attentiveness to the other's emotional state. A queen might receive a carefully composed message from her consort during a long tour, containing encouragement, reassurance, or reflections on daily life. These communications, Tog modest, reinforced the enduring bond and reminded both partners that amidst the weight of crowns and crowns' responsibilities, they were not alone. The rhythms of daily life reinforced affection. Sarayed meals, quiet walks in palace gardens, evening reflections on the day's events, all these seemingly mundane moments became vessels of connection. Together, they observed the growth of heirs, managed the intricacies of court, and endured the passing of seasons, each year layering familiarity, trust, and comfort atop the foundation of their initial union. It was in these ordinary yet profound moments that companionship revealed its depth, quietly shaping the emotional landscape of royal life. Even challenges strengthened the bonds of partnership. Illness, political turmoil, and personal loss tested the patience and resilience of queens and consorts alike. Yet, enduring presence and steady care often proved stronger than passion alone. One partner's quiet support during moments of sorrow could forge an intimacy more profound than any fleeting thrill of youthful romance. It was a love refined by experience, steadied by commitment, and enriched by shared endurance. Through centuries and across continents, the pattern holds true. Long-term partnerships, built on companionship, patience, and loyalty, offered a form of royal love that endured beyond ceremony, intrigue, and fleeting passion. The affection between a queen and her consort might be understated, but it was no less powerful. It shaped decisions, influenced courts, and provided a private sanctuary amid the public demands of crowns and kingdoms. As night settled over palace corridors, gardens, and chambers, these enduring relationships found quiet reflection. The flickering candlelight, the soft rustle of silk, and the gentle breathing of two companions resting near one another signaled the subtle, steady presence of love. Love that endured, matured, and provided comfort. It was a testament to the human heart's capacity for patience, tenderness, and devotion, even amidst the extraordinary demands of royal life. And so, in the hush of ancient halls, and the gentle shadow of towering spires, the story of queens, consorts, and companionship endures. It reminds us that the most profound forms of love are often quiet, steady, and patient. Even amid crowns, ceremonies, and responsibilities of state, the human heart seeks connection, thrives in loyalty, and rests in the gentle presence of a devoted partner. In these private, enduring unions, history offers a soft lesson that love, when nurtured through years, becomes a companion itself, guiding hearts through duty, challenges, and the passage of time. Even amid the grandeur of palaces, the richness of courtly life, and the enduring companionships of long-term unions, love was not always sustained. Royal hearts, bound by duty and crowned expectation, sometimes faced sorrow, separation, and silent disappointment. These were the stories of broken vows, of partnerships that faltered under the weight of politics, ambition, or circumstance, stories where hearts endured quiet loss, and history carried their echoes gently, like soft whispers in empty halls. In England, the Tudor court offers such tales. Marriages once celebrated with pomp and ceremony could unravel under the pressures of politics, the desire for heirs, or the capricious winds of favor. A queen might find herself isolated, her hopes of affection unmet, her days filled with ceremonies that masked loneliness. A prince, bound to duty, could struggle with personal longing, yet constrained by protocol, forbidden to voice his disappointment. And so, behind velvet drapes and closed doors, hearts endured quietly, the grief of lost expectation softened by the rhythms of daily court life. Across France, royal marriages could falter despite initial devotion. Political alliances shifted, favor shifted, and what was once a bond of promise became a chain of responsibility. Courtiers whispered, advisors interceded, and personal desire was often subordinated to dynastic necessity. Yet even in sorrow, there was dignity. Letters were written with careful politeness. Gestures of respect continued, and emotions were carried in subtle glances or private reflection rather than loud expression. The heart learned restraint, cultivating endurance in the silence of expectation. Far to the east, in the Mughal courts, love could falter under duty. An emperor, engaged in conquest or administration, might find his affections constrained by the demands of empire. A consort, meanwhile, could endure distance, expectation, or rivalry in the harem, her devotion quietly tested. Yet, even in such hardship, small acts of care persisted. A thoughtful note sent in secret, a gentle recognition of presence, a shared moment of observation from behind lattice screens. These gestures, too modest, carried the weight of resilience, proving that love endures even when altered by circumstance. In Ming China, long-planned marriages or unions arranged for political harmony occasionally fell into quiet disarray. A prince or princess might grow distant, obligations might take precedence, and affection could fade into routine. Yet, the rituals of respect remained. Shared meals, ceremonial bows, and the continued performance of duties ensured that sorrow did not dissolve into neglect. Even in loss, decorum preserved dignity, and hearts learned the patient acceptance of what could not be changed. Not all heartbreak was public. Some stories ended quietly, without scandal, with neither court nor citizen witnessing the subtle grief of a lonely monarch or consort. A queen might rise each morning, perform her duties with grace, and yet carry within her the soft ache of unmet desire. A king might observe his court with careful composure, hiding the pang of disappointment beneath a composed exterior. The silence of these moments, though sorrowful, created space for reflection, empathy, and quiet resilience. The lessons of broken vows were gentle, yet profound. They revealed that even royalty, elevated above common concerns, could not escape the fragility of human emotion. Sorrow softened hearts, loss tempered expectation, and the quiet endurance of grief became a form of nobility itself. In corridors lined with gold, in gardens scented with jasmine, and in chambers lit by candlelight, hearts endured quietly, teaching history that love, even when broken, carries significance. These quiet endings were not always marked by bitterness. Resignation, reflection, and acceptance transformed sorrow into a gentle presence. A couple might continue to coexist with civility, honoring duty while accepting the absence of passion. Or, when separation was necessary, each might find solace in ritual, private reflection, or small gestures of care for family, heirs, and the continuity of dynastic life. In tissue-wise, the emotional landscape of royalty remained tender, even amid disappointment. If any in exile, banishment, or widowhood, love's memory endured softly. A queen removed from her court might still recall moments of shared laughter, subtle intimacies, and tender gestures. A consort living apart from the crown could carry the quiet warmth of early devotion, preserved like a hidden treasure, comforting in the hours of solitude. These memories, though tinged with sadness, were gentle companions, reminding the heart of connection even when circumstance denied its present fulfillment. History offers numerous examples. In England, Henry VIII's marriages demonstrate the delicate balance between desire, duty, and disappointment. In France, Catherine de' Medici navigated court alliances with grace despite personal sacrifices. In India, Mughal consorts endured shifts in imperial favor with quiet dignity. Even across China, imperial families maintained poise and decorum, preserving love's memory amidst political necessity. All these stories converge on the same quiet truth. Loss is universal, even behind the gilded walls of palace life. Yet in this quiet sorrow, there is comfort. Time, reflection, and the endurance of routine allow hearts to heal, adapt, and preserve dignity. Broken vows do not erase the human capacity for tenderness. Rather, they reveal its depth, its fragility, and its resilience. Even when love does not endure as originally intended, its memory becomes a gentle echo, a soft presence that lingers quietly in palaces and chambers, across generations and continents. And so, as night falls over castle, towers, palaces, and imperial halls, the echoes of broken vows and silent hearts linger softly. Candles flicker in empty corridors, gardens sigh with gentle breezes, and the quiet of evening provides space for reflection and solace. Here, in the hush, grief and tenderness coexist, offering history a lesson in patience, resilience, and the enduring capacity of the human heart. Even in sorrow, love leaves its gentle imprint, a whisper among the tapestries, a soft memory in the corridors, and a calm presence in the quiet chambers of time. In the end, royal heart, though sometimes bruised, never lose their capacity for hope. They teach that even amid loss, pain, and silent resignation, there is a softness to be preserved, a dignity to maintain, and a gentle promise that the human spirit endures. Palaces may hold grandeur, crowns may symbolize power, and ceremonies may mark union, but the quiet story of broken vows reminds us that hearts, fragile, tender, and resolute, continue to beat, reflect, and rest, even as night settles over history. As night settles over the ancient halls of castles and palaces, a stillness drapes every corridor, every gallery, every chamber. Candles flicker softly, their gentle light tracing the edges of tapestries, illuminating portraits of kings and queens whose lives were both extraordinary and quietly human. It is in this hush that the echoes of royal romance linger, whispers of love that transcended time, ceremony, duty, and even heartbreak. Though the crowns gleam and the banners fluttered in their day, it is the private, tender moments that remain etched in memory, soft as the rustle of silk, as fleeting as a smile exchanged behind closed doors. From the first whispers of alliance to the grandeur of weddings, from secret letters to enduring companionship, history has recorded not only the weight of crowns, but the warmth of hearts. Across continents and centuries, royal love stories were shaped by duty and obligation, yet beneath the gilded layers of expectation, the human heart sought connection, tenderness, and understanding. It is this quiet, universal truth that resonates as night deepens. Even in the most public and ornate of lives, love is fragile, patient, and enduring. In palaces of England, the stories of Victoria and Albert remind us of love as steady companionship, a quiet bond nurtured over decades of shared responsibility. Across France, whispered courtly romances revealed the careful patience and subtle glances that conveyed devotion beyond the reach of ceremony. In Mughal India, secret gardens and lattice windows hid tender words and gestures, delicate as flower petals, carefully preserved in the shadow of empire. Even in Ming China, ritual and decorum shaped unions, yet private attention, shared observation, and soft acknowledgement allowed love to breathe quietly behind screens and ceremonial walls. Throughout these eras, the human heart, even when bound by crowns and dynasties, remained resilient. Love blossomed in small gestures, a hand resting lightly upon a sleeve, a glance that lingered just long enough to convey care, a shared laugh amidst the vast machinery of court life. It flourished in letters and poetry, in moments of quiet companionship, and even in forbidden affections that were hidden from public view. Every private moment, every subtle touch, every whispered word carried significance, echoing across time in the soft rhythm of hearts meeting, longing, and sometimes quietly parting. Even the stories of sorrow and broken vows are part of this gentle tapestry. Not every love endured. Not every partnership survived the pressures of duty, war, or political necessity. Yet, in these silent hearts and quiet resignations, there is a tenderness that remains. A queen separated from her consort may still remember a shared smile, a careful word, a moment of gentle understanding. A king, distanced from his first desire, may treasure the memory of a touch or the cadence of a familiar voice. Loss, in this context, is not harsh or bitter, but a soft presence, a quiet shadow that coexists with the endurance of memory, preserving the essence of love even when circumstances changed. As night deepens, the castle corridors stretch in hushed serenity. The clatter of servants has faded. Tapestries sway faintly in a gentle draft. The moonlight rests upon marble floors, creating pools of calm. In Tiskiat, the stories of royal love, from secret beginnings to enduring companionship, from fleeting passion to heartbreak, gather into a gentle current, guiding the mind into reflection and the body toward rest. Here, the grandeur of crowns, the spectacle of ceremonies, and the weight of history dissolve into soft echoes of emotion, leaving only the essence of the human heart, tender, hopeful, and ever-seeking connection. The lessons of these royal romances are both simple and profound. Love, whether fleeting or enduring, public or private, grand or subtle, thrives in the spaces of patience, care, and attention. It endures through ceremony and secrecy, through expectation and limitation, through loss and resilience. Even the smallest gestures, the touch of a hand, a shared glance, a quietly exchanged word, carry significance beyond the moment, creating threads that weave through history, connecting hearts across time and place. As one imagines walking through these quiet halls, passing portraits in candlelight, the stories become lullabies of human experience. The rhythm of palaced life, once loud with ceremony, now soft and subdued, mirrors the gentle unfolding of dreams. Courts, gardens, and chambers, though vast and imposing in daylight, now cradled moments of introspection, calm, and emotional warmth. It is in this calm that listeners can rest, tracing the quiet trails of love that have endured across centuries, feeling the steady pulse of human connection, even when hidden behind crowns and protocol. Perhaps, in a French garden, a secret glance exchanged between two young royals speaks of tenderness unspoken. Perhaps, in an English chamber, a queen writes a careful letter to her consort, her words carrying devotion across miles. Perhaps in a Mughal courtyard, two lovers share a fleeting moment beside a fountain, the fragrance of jasmine surrounding their whispered words. Or perhaps in a Ming palace, gestures of care and subtle acknowledgement create a bond that surpasses ceremony. Across time and space, these moments echo softly, like whispers in a quiet room, reminding all who listen that love, in its many forms, is fragile, resilient, and eternally human. As the night wears on, one can imagine the palace doors closing, the corridors emptying, and the castle settling into stillness. The soft glow of candlelight flickers and fades, leaving moonlight to dance across stone floors and embroidered tapestries. Footsteps, once bustling with preparation and ceremony, are now mere echoes, fading into silence. Intisked hearts breathe freely, emotions rest, and the human stories of love, longing, and companionship linger in a soft, timeless embrace. And so, as the listener drifts, the halls of history remain peaceful. The stories of royal beginnings, secret courtships, ceremonial grande, enduring companionship, forbidden affection, and quiet heartbreak converge into a single, gentle current. It flows calmly, carrying with it the tender truths of humanity, the fragility and endurance of love, and the quiet beauty of hearts striving to connect across centuries. Rest now, as the moonlight filters through palace windows, as candles flicker and fade, and as the echoes of royal romance settle into the hush of night. History, in all its splendor and intimacy, has whispered its secrets, leaving only calm reflection and the gentle embrace of sleep. The crowns may shine no longer, the music may have ceased, yet love, in all its forms, tender, enduring, or quietly lost, rests here, softly, eternally, in the corridors of memory in the heart of time. As our journey through the grand halls and quiet chambers of history draws to a close, the echoes of royal romance linger softly in the mind. From whispered letters in candlelit rooms, to the splendor of weddings, to the enduring companionship of queens and consorts, we have glimpsed a world where love, longing, and human tenderness persisted even amidst crowns and dynasties. Thank you, dear viewers and listeners, for joining us on this soothing exploration of the past. Your presence allows these gentle tales to continue stories crafted not only to inform, but to calm, to reflect, and to guide you toward peaceful rest. If you have enjoyed this tranquil journey through royal history, we invite you to subscribe to our channel. By subscribing, you will continue to receive serene stories from the corridors of time, perfect for relaxing, studying, or drifting into sleep. As the night deepens and palace corridors fall silent, let the quiet whispers of history carry you further into rest. Imagine candlelight flickering gently on tapestries, the soft rustle of silk as noble couples move through empty halls, and the moon casting its silver glow upon gardens and towers. Even amid grandeur loss and the weight of duty, love endured, in letters, in companionship, in small gestures of tenderness that survive through the ages. Now, as our spoken journey comes to its gentle conclusion, the music will continue to play, flowing into a calming, sleep-inducing ambience. Allow it to guide your thoughts softly, carrying you into dreams where the quiet beauty of history and the tender human heart meet in peaceful harmony. Rest now, dear listener. The palace is quiet, The halls are still, and the echoes of royal love, tender, enduring, and human, are all around. Sleep deeply, and let the stories of the past soothe you into the soft embrace of night.